Hey, it's Craig Syracuse, and welcome to another episode of Walk in Faith, the show where we go beyond the image and we discover who our guests really are. You might know them from TV, the big screen, or even the world of sports, but do we really know who they are as a person? Do we know what motivates them? Do we know what inspires them? Well, that's what we're here to find out. On this episode of Walk in Faith, former NFL defensive end Devon Still, who's also the founder of the StillStrong Foundation, talks about his book and the real meaning behind the title, Still in the Game. Stay tuned and walk with us. Devon, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Like I was saying off camera, I loved your book. But I was reading it a lot in the gym, and I started to get emotional. And I'm like, I got to stop because nobody wants to work out next to somebody who's crying. But I loved it. I really did. Now, where did you grow up? I was reading the book. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Camden, New Jersey, but I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware.
Okay. And did you have like an average childhood? Like, what was it like growing up for you?
To me, it was an average childhood. It was the perfect childhood for me because, you know, my family really taught us how important family was. We didn't have a lot of things financially, but we always had what we needed, and that was just the love and support of each other.
And now your parents, they split up when you were young, right?
When I was in third grade, my parents split up, and it was devastating to our family, right? Just being in a household where you have both of your parents to go on to just live with your mom and not seeing your dad as often, it was tough.
Who did you live with at first? You lived with your dad?
I lived with my mom at first, and then I started getting into a lot of trouble, as you can tell in the book. Yeah. And we ended up getting evicted. And I think during that time, it was one of our worst moments, but it was one of the best moments when I look back, because moving with my dad is when my life had changed because I had more structure.
And now during that time, did you attend Mass? I think you mentioned in the book maybe your grandmother, but did you have sort of a structured faith or any sort of connection to faith?
I used to go to church a lot with my grandmother when I was around that age, when my parents originally got divorced. But when she moved to Detroit and left, my parents really weren't into church, so we didn't go as much. So I started to, lose a lot of my faith or my connection with God when my grandmother left. And
the story in there and you mentioned about getting in trouble, which I love the story about the bike. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about that story and how that sort of changed your life a lot.
So I had a really rusty bike that was missing a seat. It had a bad chain on it, and one of my mom's boyfriend told me that, when he was younger, they used to always steal bikes and take parts off it. When he said that, I was like, I think that's a good idea. There's a big bike rack outside of my school that I could just take a bike from. So the next day at school, I saw a bike that wasn't chained up. I stole the bike, and I asked all the people who were watching me to not say anything, thinking that, they're my friends, they're not going to say anything. And then when I went to my neighborhood, I saw this guy with a tank top on and blue jeans and long white socks, and I knew that was my dad walking up the street. So I took off riding away because I didn't want him to see me with the bike. But then he ended up catching up to me. He told me that the cops wanted to bring me in, so he took me to the police station, and they ended up locking me up for some time down in the basement inside the cells. And it was really a defining moment for my life because I realized that if I continued down the path that I was on, then this is probably where I would land for good, and I didn't want my life to be that way.
Do you still think about that moment when you were in that cell?
No, not at all.
Really?
Once I got out of there,
you don't reflect on it all and say?
It made me change right then and there, and I didn't want to think about it no more.
Now, why did you steal that bike, though? What was the real reason?
We didn't have any money, and I knew that was the only way I could get it.
Because I was thinking, because as I was reading, right, I said, because your relationship with your father, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm just, just making an assumption. But was it sort of to bring you guys closer? Were you trying to gain attention from your father? Was that one of the reasons why?
When I look back at it like that, I can't say that specific moment was for me to see my dad. It was really, I wanted to have other things that other kids have because we didn't have a lot of money. But I feel like when I look back at it, the amount of trouble I was getting into, the things that I was doing, I feel like I wanted to see my dad because every time I got in trouble, my mom would call my dad and he would pop up. It didn't matter if I was going to get in trouble or not. Just being able to see my dad more often like I used to see before he had got divorced with my mom, then I feel like that was the reason behind it.
So it sort of strengthened your relationship with your father. Right. When did you start playing football when you were a kid?
Well, I originally started when I was in 5th grade, but I never got to play. I was on the sidelines all the time. But when I really started to fall in love with the game and learn the game of football, I was 13 years old.
13.
Yeah.
So you started to play, and then I was reading too about the parties. Like when I read about the scene that there was in the book, you said how you weren't afraid to die,
Right?
Because a lot of your friends, people you knew, would wind up on a T-shirt.
Right.
And then there was that one party, I guess, that almost ended everything, right? Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Basically, the type of environment I grew up in, everybody lived by the saying, "Live fast, die young." It's because we didn't know any better, right? This is the environment we were growing up in, so we thought it was normal. So I wasn't scared of dying. Like a lot of people celebrate, when they make it to 20 years old, make it to 18 years old, just because those are the things that we're taught. And I was getting in trouble a lot with the law. I was going to these parties, and after every party, there was a shooting. Somebody was gonna get shot. You knew that for a fact. But for some reason, we continued to go to these parties, knowing what was gonna happen. And one night, right before I was gonna go off to college, I was my senior year in high school, we went to a party that weekend, and when we left, there was a big shooting outside of the party. And somebody that had drove in a car with us to the party, who I didn't know too well, was actually shooting at the party. And we had all ran to the car, and right when we was about to pull off, the guy that I saw shooting the gun jumped into the car, pulled off with us, and my best friend forgot to turn on his headlights, and we got pulled over by the cops, and it was like 10 different cop cars out there. They came and approached the car and made all of us get out and search the car and found a gun. And the cop ended up locking up everybody that was in the car except for me, and he told me that he didn't want to ruin my future because he saw me in the newspaper. He knew I had a chance to make it out of that environment. He didn't want me to throw it all away.
Did you ever reach out to the police officer that sort of saved you?
I reached out to him, ironically, because a couple of years into my time at Penn State, he got into a really bad car accident. And when I found out, I had called him just to check on him, see how he was doing, and just to thank him for giving me a second chance, because I was able to take that and run with it and really make a change for my family.
Okay, so what's interesting too, you went to Penn State, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of an eye-opener for you, especially when you were walking, on campus. Mm-hmm. And then I started to read about, your workout and the struggles. And I'm like, all right, I go to the gym every day, but tell me, like, I'm not big into football, sorry, but like, what is it like? What kind of like training do you do? Is it, 30 minutes on the treadmill? Like, tell me a little bit about the sacrifice that you make.
See, this is not like a LA Fitness gym workout. This is like some intense stuff. Like when I first got there to Penn State, I never had worked out as hard as they made us do. Honestly, I feel like the first day they were trying to see who was meant to be there, who was going to break. So I remember doing like 10 100-yard sprints, 8 80-yard shuttles, 60-yard shuttles, and 40-yard sprints. And I saw people like passing out, throwing up everywhere. Like I was almost on the verge of passing out. And when I made it out of there, I walked back to my dorm room and I called my dad and I was like, I honestly don't think that football is for me. Like this is not what I imagined college football to be like. But he just told me to keep going and keep trying, because eventually I'd get used to it. So I started to go back and just continue to work hard, and soon it got easy. The one thing that used to be hard became easy, and I started to enjoy it. And then my career, it took off after a while.
And how many hours a day would you train, like at Penn State?
What made it so hard was 5 a.m. runs, 5 a.m. workouts. So you're waking up, it's freezing cold at Penn State. You have nothing in your system to provide you energy. It's straight willpower.
And you were out the night before. You were.
Oh yeah,
you were in the library reading.
We was having fun. We was having fun. So that played a big role. But it was really just to try to train your mind to be able to break through that wall, because most people don't know how far they can go because they give up when things get tough. But those workouts really proved to me that I have a deeper wall, right? That I can continue to push myself as far as I can possibly go.
I was thinking, I was like, could I really endure that? Because we all think that we could, I could take it, I could do it. I'm like, I don't think I could. I mean, the amount of surgeries you've had and injuries and that's a lot to handle. Right. I don't think most people can.
To be honest, I think most people have the perspective that they don't think they can do something rather than thinking they can do something. Like, I didn't think I could make it through the type of injuries I went through. I didn't think that I could ever watch my daughter fight a disease like cancer. But when you're presented that type of situation, sometimes you don't have no choice but to prevail.
In 2010, Leah was born,
right.
and that was, it's a beautiful moment in the book. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
For me, it was perfect timing, because when you read the book, you'll see the amount of struggles that I was going through at Penn State with the back-to-back season and the injuries that I had my first 2 years. And I really saw a lot of people start to give up on me, and I had questions of giving up on my dream. But when Leah was born, it's like it gave me that motivation that, okay, this is not just me making it to the NFL because it's my dream, but it's me making it to the NFL so I can provide a better life for my daughter than I had when I was a child. And just watching her being born is like, it's something that you have to experience, just watching a life come into this world and knowing that you're in charge of protecting her and providing her with the best opportunities possible. It changed my world because I remember every time I would go out on the football field my senior year, I would think about my daughter right before the kickoff, and I'll have tears rolling down my eyes, and I would tell myself that I can't allow the man in front of me to stop me from providing a better life for my daughter.
So now you graduated, how many years after Leah was born? Was that
2 years. She was born going into my junior year.
And that moment when you I think it was you hugged your mom and you know, you said to your daughter or to your mother that, you know, Leah had no idea, like, you know, the type of life and what you were gonna sort of, you know, do for her. And can you tell me about that experience? And then your father said something to you too also that day, right? That like he was proud of you. Can you tell me about that experience graduating from Penn State?
Yeah, so I actually thought, you know, because growing up, my dad watched football all the time. And that's when I was first introduced to football, because he was a big Steelers fan. So when I was having all the success on the football field when I was at Penn State, I thought that was going to be, you know, the proudest moment of, you know, my dad's life, is to watch his son finally get to play in the NFL. But he always told me that the man I became and the father I became superseded everything that I had accomplished on the football field, and it meant a lot. And I didn't know how much it would mean to me later down the road when I didn't have football anymore, and you often question whether your parents are still proud of you when things didn't pan out the way they were supposed to. But I still have a chance to be a father right now, and I know that that makes my dad prouder than he could ever be if I was still a football player.
And he made so many sacrifices for you growing up that in the moment, sometimes we don't realize them. We don't see it until we're older. Did you ever have that opportunity to tell him and thank him?
I actually just wrote him a long letter, him and my mom, about a month ago, because I don't feel like I ever sat down and really thanked them for what they did. Like you said, when you're younger, you don't understand the sacrifices that your parents make until you get older, and you're like, life is really hard. Like, I don't understand how they were able to provide in some of the situations we were in. And of course, I did things for them when I made it to the NFL, but nothing really takes the place of hearing somebody say something, writing a letter to somebody and letting them know exactly how you feel about them. So I decided to do that for my parents.
Tell me about the draft. Like, how difficult is it to become a football player? Like, what are the statistics? Walk me through, like, what's the draft like?
See, it depends on everybody's situation. I know about 1% of high school athletes make it to the NFL. It's tough, especially with the amount of people you know that are playing football. For me, my experience with the draft wasn't as pleasant as I wanted it to be. It was for a number of reasons. I feel like I played a big role in that. For one, when you read the book, you hear about what my senior year was really like me being a top prospect in the NFL draft, and then us getting hit with the Jerry Sandusky scandal, and me having to make decisions that weren't necessarily in the best interest of myself and my dreams and my future career, but for the university, which really took a toll on where I got drafted. You know, I was supposed to be a first-round draft pick, get picked the first day. I got invited to New York at Radio City Music Hall, and I didn't get called on the first day. That's embarrassing when you're sitting in a room, you having everybody at home watching the TV, waiting for you to get drafted to see your dreams come true, and you don't get that phone call. And I became very frustrated. I was angry, and I thought about not going back for the second day because there was people in my ear telling me that I may drop to the third round, but something in me told me I needed to go back. And I feel like that was the best decision I ever made, because if I didn't go back because I was scared, I would have missed that opportunity and that experience to hear the commissioner call my name and for me to walk out on the stage after I got drafted.
And your family was with you too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's an experience for them to share that. That's
exactly.
Just so I know. So at the draft, if you're at the draft, you're guaranteed to be in the NFL, or are there certain people that aren't drafted?
Nothing in life is guaranteed. You can hear what's supposed to happen with your career, but the chips are going to fall where they may. And not everybody get drafted. Some people sign free agency and find their way on the team, but some people never see their dream of making it to the NFL come true, and that's just a part of life.
Now, you were drafted by the Bengals?
Cincinnati Bengals, yep.
Wow, okay. So now how did that, so now tell me a little bit about that. You started off with the Bengals, right? And then Tell me how that worked out.
It was crazy. When I first got to Cincinnati, I was dealing with a lot of injuries at Penn State. I had tore my rotator cuff. I had broke my toe. I was having back issues, but I tried to hide them from the scouts because when they find out you have certain type of injuries, you can really drop in the draft. So I didn't get to train for the combine or go to the Senior Bowl and things of that nature. But when I first got to the Bengals, I was having a breakout rookie training camp. I was doing really good. They were talking barely highly of me. But when we got into veteran training camp, I ended up blowing my back out. And they thought I was going to have to get surgery. But I remember seeing on TV, one of the ESPN analysts had said that when you have back surgery playing football, then you usually don't bounce back from that. So in that moment, I told myself that I wasn't going to lose my career before I even started. So I made the decision to not get the back surgery. And looking back at it, that was probably the wrong decision because I never felt the same. I never felt like how I did at Penn State. And then I just started to battle injuries throughout my whole time there. And that's one of the reasons why I ended up getting back into church. So I feel like I never got to enjoy the dream that I worked so hard for.
And now you met Asha during when you were playing football for the Bengals?
Right after I got drafted.
I mean, she sounds like she's an angel.
Oh yeah, she kept me calm because I had my mind focused that I'm gonna live this NFL lifestyle, I'm gonna have fun and things like that. But she changed that all up the first time I saw her. I knew automatically that she was the one.
You mentioned about the injuries, but the EKG, right? Mm-hmm. When they did the EKG, what did they find?
So right after my back surgery, I ended up flying back to Delaware to be with my family for the off season. And when I was sitting in a hotel, I was experiencing pains in my side, but I thought it was because I had my back brace too tight from my back surgery. But this pain was persistent. It didn't stop. And I ended up going over my dad's house. And like, as soon as I walked in the door, I collapsed to the ground and I just started crying because I could barely breathe and the pain was so sharp. And my dad ended up making me go to the hospital to find out what was going on. And even then, the wait was so long, I kept telling my dad that I was good, that we could just go home. And he was like, no, we're not going anywhere because something's wrong with you. Then I ended up finding out after the EKG that I had a bunch of blood clots in my lungs and that I made it to the hospital at the right time.
Oh my God. That's difficult to...
Yeah.
Okay, so during this time, I know we spoke about God a little bit. So Asha said to you, was it when you were in the hospital when Asha said that you don't really have a strong relationship with God and that's sort of what's lacking from your life? When did she say that? Was that during the blood clot issue, or was that?
This was in Cincinnati. This is when I just came off of having a dislocated elbow that I got back surgery a couple of weeks later, and I just started questioning where my life was going, what direction was I going in, and Asha just kept it real with me. It was like, maybe it's because you don't have a close enough relationship with God. Maybe he's trying to bring you closer to him, and that's when we made the decision that when we went back home during the off season, we was going to spend that time developing a relationship with God.
So you, at that point, you were sort of ready to listen to, because God was always there. I mean,
right.
We know it was just you know, sort of distracted.
Right.
And now life was pretty good at that time. And then, you know, you got a call from, was it your mom that called you to let you know that, you know, Leah wasn't feeling well?
It was Leah's maternal grandmother who gave me a call. And it's ironic when she gave me this call because, first of all, I wouldn't have been home if Leah didn't have a dance recital. And that morning I had dropped my wife off at work, and as I was going back home, I stopped at a red light and my phone started ringing, and I answered the phone and it was Leah's grandma, and she was telling me that Leah wasn't feeling well, that I should set up a doctor's appointment to find out what's going on. And originally I was going to wait till I got back to the apartment to call her doctor and set up an appointment, but something told me that I needed to do it right now, so I asked where they were at, and they was right across the street at a restaurant from where I had stopped at the red light. So I went into the restaurant and I picked Leah up and took her to the hospital.
And then I think the most emotional part of the book for me was, you know, was in the chapel, right? So she's in the hospital and then you go downstairs to the chapel.
Right.
I mean, I think we've all experienced going there. Tell me about that.
Right. So I remember just being in her room and it was a million things going through my mind with all the news that I was hearing the doctors tell me about. So I decided to go down to the chapel in the hospital. And immediately when I walked through those doors, I just started to break down and cry. And I remember walking up to the front of the room and I fell to my knees. And I remembered hearing in church that if you ever wanted to know if God was with you or feel his presence, just ask for it. So I just started crying out to God, asking him to show me that I wasn't alone, show me that he was there with me. I was doing a real ugly cry, like when you have snot going over everywhere, tears falling all over the place. And when I said that, I felt like every door in that room started shaking, and I got scared, and I got up and I hurried up and walked out the room because I didn't know what was going on. And to this day, I regret, getting myself out of that moment because I felt like God was speaking to me. But what I heard and what I saw was enough. I always heard these stories of people saying these supernatural things happen when they talk to God, and I thought that they was making that type of stuff up. But actually experiencing it for myself, it was crazy and amazing at the same time.
What was it like? Like, what did you see? What did you hear? Was it a voice, or was it just something within you?
It was like an earthquake. Like, honestly, it was like an earthquake, and all the doors in that room started shaking. And when I hurried up and left the room, I started to check the doors, and I thought maybe somebody was trying to get in and the doors were locked, but the doors weren't locked. And it was just, I feel like in that moment, God was letting me know that everything was gonna be okay.
So, I mean, that moment, right? But also, too, it's what you said. So let's just say there was an earthquake or there was a storm or construction. What you said, and I must have told 5, 6 people, right? You said that, God, take the cancer out of Leah and put it in me, right? And then you went upstairs. I mean, and she said that to you, or she rubbed your stomach. Come on, I mean, that's, tell me that. I mean, tell me that.
I just felt as though I had experienced a lot in my life. I had a great childhood in my eyes. I experienced playing D1 football. I made it to the NFL. I felt like I was living my dreams. And when I saw my daughter's life was on the line, I felt like she didn't have a chance to even find out what life was all about. So I would rather my life be taken than her life be taken, because I felt like I did more than a lot of people do in their life. I experienced more than a lot of people experience. And I just started praying that God would take the cancer out of her and give it to me and allow me to fight this battle. And that night when we were laying in our hospital bed, I had dozed off. And when I woke up, I just felt like my daughter just kept going like this with her stomach to mine. And I was asking her, like, what are you doing? And she was like, Dad, I'm taking this out of me and giving it to you. And I thought in that moment that God heard my prayers and he was giving me exactly what I wanted, which was to fight this disease myself. And it was just, that night was crazy.
Did you ever ask her why she did that?
No, she gave me her answer. I didn't ask her anymore because I felt like in that moment that was God giving me a sign. Maybe she didn't know why she was doing it, but I felt like I knew why she was doing it.
Now, Leah was diagnosed with, what type of cancer was it?
Stage 4 neuroblastoma.
And now she started to, what type of treatment did she go through?
She went through a variety of treatments. The first treatment was a radiation treatment where she would get about 2 months of intense chemo followed by 5 days of radiation, and then she would get tests done. When we got those tests done, we found out that the cancer had spread all over her body, which was devastating to our family because it was first localized in her hip, but it ended up going to her chest, to her arms, her neck, and her skull. And if there was ever a moment where I really thought that my daughter was going to die, it was when I got that news. But I always taught my daughter that in life, just like in football, that you have to fight for 4 quarters. It doesn't matter, how tired you are, how much pain you're in, what the doctor says, that until you're buried in the ground or I'm buried in the ground, that we're not giving up this fight. So we continued to fight after getting that bad news. And 3 months later, after putting her into a new trial, her cancer was gone.
Wow. And she's in remission for how many years now?
Almost 4 years in remission.
And then you said if it's 5 years, it's...
The chances of it coming back drop significantly.
And during that, you started to use your platform on the NFL to let people know. At what point did you start to use that platform? And why did you decide to do that?
After I had that moment in the chapel, I decided to give my daughter's fight with cancer a purpose. Like, I have a lot of people that reach out to me now where they just don't know what their purpose is in life. Like, they continue to pray to God and they feel like they're not getting any answers. And I can honestly say I never got an answer for God when I prayed, because I also had those issues where I'm praying to God asking, why does my daughter have to go through this? But then one day I just realized that you don't have to wait for an answer to do something, right? That you're in control of your life. So I decided to give Leah's fight a purpose. And when I did that, I started to see things move a certain way, because I believe that when you give purpose to your life and it aligns with God's purpose for your life, certain doors and opportunities are going to open that you could have never opened on your own.
Okay, so now you created this platform you started to do. I know you raised a lot of, well, they raised a lot of money through the jerseys. So what happened next? Now you opened up a charity, right? Or not-for-profit. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so in 2015, we opened up a foundation called the StillStrong Foundation because one time we were in a hospital. I took Leah to the playroom to color because that's one of the things she liked to do to pass her treatment time. And when we walked into the room, there was a little girl sitting at a table by herself with an IV pole sitting next to her and a bag of chemo dripping into the Broviac catheter that hung from her chest. So we sat next to her because she didn't have nobody at the table with her. And when we started coloring, a couple of minutes later, she started to open up and tell us that, you know, she oftentimes had to spend time in the hospital by herself because she came from a single-parent household and her mom had to leave to go to work so she could pay the bills. And that crushed my heart because there's no way that a little 8-year-old should be sitting in the hospital fighting for her life by herself. So I asked for her mom's phone number. She gave it to me, and I called her mom and offered to pay out of my own pocket for her bills and stuff so she can be in the hospital. And then I told Leah after that we needed to start a foundation where we pay the household bills of families so that we can keep them in the hospital fighting together.
What do you think the ultimate plan is for your life? What do you think God has in store for you? I mean, you've done everything so far, football, but like, what do you think the ultimate?
To be honest with you, I don't know. I think God orders each step at a time. He never lets you see the end goal, but you just have to follow what he's presenting you, and soon it will lead you down the right path. I try not to look too far ahead and just focus on the assignment that I have right now. Like for me, I never had plans on writing this book, but just one day I was inspired by an interview I saw on TV, and something came to me where it said that this was my assignment to do, right? And when I decided to write this book, I felt like I did it the wrong way as far as having aspirations of making it to the New York Times bestseller and things of that nature, when all I should have been focused on was my assignment of getting this complete, because I don't know if God needed one person to hear the message in the book that has a chance to change the world, or there's 100 people, 100,000 people need to hear this message. I felt like my assignment was to get this book done, and God's going to place it into the people's hands he needs it to be in.
There's 1,000 books out there. There's a lot of athletes. Like, what would you say to somebody that's sort of, you know, walking around Barnes and Nobles or a bookstore? Why would somebody pick up your book?
A lot of times when people look at the cover, they think that still in the game means sports. But for me, it has nothing to do with sports. It has everything to do with the game of life. And for so many years out of my life, I felt like I was playing the game of life from the sidelines because I continued to have struggles throughout my life, obstacles that I was facing. And I was oftentimes waiting for somebody to come save my life for me, not knowing that I had control of my life and that I needed to get the courage to get off the sidelines and get off the bench and get back into the game, because you can't win from watching on the sidelines. You can't depend on other people to keep scoring points for you. You have to do it yourself. And like I said, God will surround you with the right team to really take your life to a new level. So for me, this book is for anybody who's going through a struggle, who feels lost, and they're trying to find a way to get back in the game. They're trying to find a way to gain back control of their life. The way that this book was inspired by God, the way that it was written, I feel like it's going to change a lot of people's lives, and I'm just excited to see what this piece of work does.
I think your testimony will surely change a lot of hearts. I mean, it made me think a lot about my life and about my family, and the chapel, the part about the chapel is just inspiring. God bless you, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Always remember, we have the ability to inspire and evangelize through our words and actions. Till next time, thanks for walking with us.